Just going on what you're talking about with Catherine, if you're numb to the pain that's in your body, do you then like hurt yourself? Because I seem to hurt myself a lot.
Right. Yep.
Is that just trying to reconnect me to the pain that's in my body, or is that...
There's two reasons why a person generally hurts themselves. One is that you go away from your body and the spirit influences your body under those circumstances. And so we've had many people that work doing labouring type of jobs, for example, in particular, because you notice it a lot when you're working outside or doing labouring types of jobs.
Yeah.
So I know one carpenter that every time he goes away from his body, within 30 seconds, he's injured himself. And if he's using a saw, that might mean, cutting off the tip of his finger, or if he's using, a power tool of some kind, it gets pretty dangerous in that 30 seconds. And that's because he's afraid. He's afraid of the spirits or the environment that he's in, and that causes him to want to get away from the environment. And in that period of time, then he no longer has total control over his own body, and therefore there's usually an accident that occurs. My father is like that with a lot of things. He has terrible accidents when he gets out of his body. He's fallen off a roofs of sheds, he's had hands cut off, he's been scalped, he's had all sorts of accidents. It's amazing in some ways that he's still alive. And one of my uncles is the same. He's had terrible accidents because he goes out of his body frequently due to fear. And as a result, he works he works as a tree lopper, can you imagine? And huge accidents, like he's broken his back twice falling out of trees. He's cut trees down on top of houses and all sorts of things in that space. So that's one primary reason we go away from ourselves. The second primary reason why we have accidents is because of self-attack and self-blame. So, in other words, we want to create a problem with our body in order to have others feel sorry for us and therefore love us, or because we want to harm ourselves because we feel that we're unworthy of something in particular. So usually it's one of those two reasons that we have accidents. Both reasons would indicate a fair amount of denial, if you think about it. So both reasons would indicate that we want to, if it's the first reason in the thing of stepping out of your body and having a spirit, have spirit influence in that moment, the key is, what did you want to avoid just before you stepped out of your body? What was it? What was the trigger for you to step away from yourself? Oftentimes you're thinking about, your relationship with your partner, or you're thinking about, something to do with your future or your past, and if you can trace that event back to that point, you'll be well benefited by doing that. You'll be well benefited by actually finding out what it is. In the second case, there's usually two reasons why we self-attack. One is to get approval from others. So in other words, like for example, I used to get sick every month for 1 week. It was like clockwork, every month for 1 week. Because I worked too hard the rest of the time, and I felt that the only way that I could get a rest was by being sick. That was the only justification for taking a rest.
Yeah, I think I used to do that as well.
Yep.
Whenever I got sick, it'd be something pretty major.
Yeah. And so what I found was that I didn't take a rest normally. I was working pretty much all of my waking hours. I'd often be working 120 hours a week. And I felt I couldn't stop. And guilt drove that, a feeling of guilt whenever I stopped, a feeling that I wasn't worthy to stop, basically. I wasn't worthy to care for myself. And so I had to create an excuse to care for myself. And so I'd get sick, and I'd get sick every month. Oftentimes people who are looking for... a lot of parents don't give approval to children unless they have an accident or are sick. So in other words, a lot of parents never hug their children, never engage their child in any way, unless the child is sick or has some kind of accident. And if that has happened during our childhood, there's a high likelihood we'll continue that process in our adult life. So in other words, we'll create accidents and sicknesses just to get the approval or acceptance or some kind of love or some kind of compassion from someone around us. So these are the things to look at if you're finding yourself having accidents frequently. By the way, many of you have accidents that you're in completely denial of as well. Just simple accidents like, cutting up the veggies at night and you cut yourself. That happens on a regular basis. Or burning yourself in the oven whenever you're cooking. Or, those kind of accidents. And many of us are in denial of those kind of accidents. We sort of see them as a fact of life or a way, that are part of our life. We don't see them as something that's actually occurring because of some kind of denial of an emotion. So the key for us is to start seeing everything like that as a connection to some kind of denial of emotion. When you are fully connected in every possible way to every possible thing you're doing, you don't finish up having accidents at all. And you become super aware of everything that's going on around you without you having to be fear-based aware of it. Does that make sense? So you know who's distressed, you know who's not, you know what the driver in front of you is going to do with his car, what the drivers coming towards you are going to do with theirs. You automatically make corrections for their actions that they may take that will somehow or potentially damage you if you weren't aware. You automatically do it. You find yourself automatically doing it, and then you miss this accident and miss that one and miss, and this is how God created you to be very aware of everything that's going on around you and very in tune with your own body, very in tune with your own life, very in tune emotionally, and therefore in tune with everything that's happening. And that's how God created you to be. Yeah. So do you want to bring up any examples?
The last accident was I had to get some stuff out of the shed, and I didn't have my key, so I broke in, and as I was climbing in, I fell, and all this stuff fell on me, and a few cuts and bruises, and a bit dazed, and sore for a couple of days after that.
So where was the shed? Your home shed?
Yeah, at home.
And where was the key?
I had two keys.
Yeah.
Philippa had one set, and she just flown off to go and do some work.
Yeah.
And then my other key was with Dave.
So a person who was helping you work.
Yeah.
Yep. So why was there no set with you?
Because I gave my key to Dave to do some work while I was away on holidays, and then we just hadn't caught up since we'd been back.
And you hadn't gotten it back?
Yeah.
Yep. Why do you think that happened? You see, there's two issues there.
Well, I remembered I needed a key just after Philip had got on the plane.
So she'd gone on a plane.
Yeah, and took her keys with her.
And took the keys with her.
Yeah.
Yeah. The reason why I ask why is because you've got two things going on. You've got something going on with women, obviously, which would mean that you've given or the woman hasn't thought of you and what you might need. And you've also got something going on with a fellow workman who you've given something to and not gotten it back from them. And Dave, you must have known that he needed it back at some point, but you would have assumed that he had a second set of keys, I gather.
When this actually happened, I thought it exactly straight away because I went away on holidays. I'm like, I should have left the key at his place, so when he got back, it would have been there. So I identified that I hadn't considered that straight away.
So two people had gone away without considering you.
Right.
How does that feel, Lincoln?
How does that feel?
I was going to say normal.
Yeah, I agree. It is normal for your life. And it's very true what you say. It is normal for your life. However, it's not normal from God's perspective. You know that. but it is normal in your life. It is something you attract regularly. So why? Why do you attract it regularly is the key. That's the question, isn't it? You see, if you had a key, you would never gone through the window and had the accident. But if you felt about why you didn't have the key before you went through the window,
yeah,
you probably wouldn't have had the accident either.
Yeah. Well, I wasn't going to go in the day that I did, but then I had to fear that if I couldn't get in, I wouldn't get the tools to do the job that I needed. So I just wanted to get it done to make sure I could get what I needed, and then...
Yeah, but it's interesting already in this conversation, you're skipping over the actual cause. The actual cause wasn't the fact that you needed the tools. The actual cause was the fact that two people hadn't thought of you, which is a regular occurrence in your life. And you don't want to feel about the grief of that. In fact, the way you avoid the grief of that is by telling yourself that it's normal. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So when you tell yourself it's normal, you're avoiding the grief of that. If you had sat outside the shed, the very first time you noticed that the shed was all locked and you had no keys, and just had a big rant and rave about the fact that nobody cared about you and then got into some grief about it, it's highly likely that either one of them would have thought about the key issue and rang you or talked to you about it or something like that, or you would have found a way into the shed that would have meant you not injuring yourself. And every subsequent event that happened because of the denial of that first emotion. Does that make sense? So often I say to people that it's tiny little things. Like Mary often says, you've got to sweat the small stuff, type of thing. Because it's often that tiny event that you can trace something back to, that there's actually something major in. So you had two people not think of you and what you would need. Right? And you often don't think of yourself and what you would need. And then you had two other people not think of you and what you would need. And as a result, you then took an action that finished up in self-harm. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah. And the whole tool thing, need the tool things, and that's just the reason you gave yourself for taking the action. But the real reason was because you didn't have the key. And so I would always trace it back to the real reason. I didn't have the key. Why didn't I have the key? Because they didn't give me the keys, or they didn't think about giving me the keys. But I thought about giving them the keys when I went somewhere. But they haven't given the keys back. And I would have thought about how I've felt about that. Does that make sense? Yeah. So I'll give you an example in my own life just recently. How's that?
Yeah, if you like.
I put in this big watering system at home because, it's been pretty dry up our way. We've had no rain for nearly 6 months. And we had all this water in a dam, and we've now got this solar pump that myself and Corny next door, we share the solar pump, we share our dam, and we've managed to get all of the stuff together. It's taken 3 years to save up the money to do it all. And we eventually put in these pipes, and it took quite a number of days, didn't it, Dave, to put all the pipes in together and get the solar pump pumping up to some tanks up at the top of the property and get all this lovely setup done. About 4 weeks after that, I went away. And my workmen on my property cut the pipe that we'd done, and diverted the water to another place and turned off the mains. Right? And so and he did it for a number of reasons, but he wasn't thinking clearly. I've given him many instructions to not do things like that before. And he was obviously under some influence to do it by spirits and others around him to do it. And he felt under pressure. He thought it would be a temporary thing. But I came back 3 weeks later and it was still the same. And of course, no water is going to the house. So we come back and there's no water going to the house, no water going to the outside of the house or anything like that. So what would you do under those circumstances? You'd go, that's normal. I didn't. I went out and got the baseball bat and bashed their head and screamed and yelled about how annoyed I was about the whole situation. Does that make sense? Just to connect emotionally to how I felt. Given the fact that I'd given direct instructions not to do that, and given the fact that we'd set up this beautiful system that was all just dismantled by one action, and I let myself feel about that emotionally. And eventually I got into the feelings of how much I still allow other people to not consider my welfare, even on my own property.
And how much you fill the gaps. You actually end up doing a lot of work to try and...
to fix up what other people's lack of consideration of me. Yeah. Does that make sense? So I'm always fixing up things where other people had no consideration of me in the first place. Because if they had any consideration of me, they wouldn't have done it. Does that make sense? And particularly on my own property. It happens all the time on my own property. We once had a gathering where 30 people wanted to come and help me green up one of our dam walls, right, by digging some sort of swales and planting. And the instructions that I gave them were that I wanted these things to hold water, and I wanted the plants to be planted in the bottom of them, not in the top of them. I wanted them in the bottom because there's very good drainage. Every single person after I went away dug a hole that didn't hold water and planted the tree in the top of the hole rather than the bottom. Every single person. Now I come back a few months later from a trip, every tree's dead. Every single one. So I had to feel a bit about that. Right? Why did it happen? Because none of them wanted to follow any instructions that I gave whatsoever, even on my own property. So there must be a soul-based thing inside of me that allows that. Does that make sense? There's got to be something inside of me that allows that to occur. There's something inside of them too. But there's something inside of me too. Does that make sense? The thing inside of them is quite obvious. They have no consideration for me whatsoever, even though they think they do. And they can't follow instructions, and they're rebellious. They don't want to do what somebody asks, even if it's their own property. That's all their emotions. But my emotions were, nobody ever does what I ask. Even they come and say, AJ, I'm going to help you with this. And I go, nowadays I go, oh, I don't know about that, whether I want that or not, because our history has been, not a single person who does that has actually ever done what I've asked. And that's got to be something in me, because I'm the common person. And it is something in me. There is this soul-based acceptance inside of me that other people are always going to just run roughshod over what I ask, no matter what that is. And other people are always going to not listen, and there's that emotion. And I've had to spend a lot of time working way through these emotions, which are all to do with unworthiness, right? But I get triggered on them very regularly. So what you see as a regular event, I see as a soul-based thing that I've attracted, that I need to allow myself to experience. And it doesn't mean that the other people don't need correction, because they do. They should have thought of you. And they didn't. Why didn't they? And at some point you're going to have that discussion with them. So at some point I've had to have a discussion with the people who have not listened to what I'm saying. I've had people come on the property to help, and I've paid them, by the way, some of these people. I've paid them to help, and I've given them a written list of instructions of what to do, right down, as Mary knows, to a lot of detail, and they still didn't do it. They still do the opposite thing. So I'd instruct them to buy 2-inch pipe, so they buy 1.5-inch pipe. I'd instruct them, and I asked them, did you know you were buying 1.5-inch pipe? Yes. I said, but I asked you to buy 2-inch pipe. Yes. So why didn't you buy 2-inch pipe? Because I thought 1.5-inch would be better. I said, but it's my property and my money, and I'm paying you for your time. Whether you think you know better or not, why didn't you do what I asked? Oh, I just thought I was better. My idea was better. That's how little regard. And what would you feel under those circumstances?
Yeah, pretty angry.
Yeah. So you got to let yourself feel these things and also address them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but isn't it my responsibility though to provide for myself? Like, I knew I needed a key. I knew Philippa was leaving. I knew my key was with Dave.
And this is where you go intellectually, right?
Right.
Yeah. It's true, it is your responsibility to provide for yourself. But the question here is, you provided for somebody else instead of yourself, and they didn't do the same for you. And that's what you're avoiding. You would have done it for them. You would have thought, I'm going away, I've got their keys still, I need to give them back. You would have thought that. But they didn't. And you got to feel about that. Does that make sense? And by using the intellect and going, yeah, but I need to care for myself and I need to... You're not feeling about that. And that's true, you do need to care for yourself. But if you had cared for yourself, you might not have given them the keys in the first place even. The key is to allow the situation to trigger the emotion at the time the situation occurred, without too much thought to what's really going on, and without blaming everybody else. When I say without blaming everybody else, don't ring them up and go, yeah, you did that, you did this to me, yeah, how dare you, rah, 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 you know, and really get into them about what they've done. You need to have a discussion with them about what they've done, because it's a lack of consideration. But to yell and scream at them about what they've done, that wouldn't be very loving, right? Yeah. But you do feel angry about it. You do feel regularly angry about how much people don't consider you. So feel it. You know, get the baseball bat out, get that punching bag out and have a good go at it, and just feel those emotions that are present. It'll help connect you with the sadness. And the sadness that's there is, nobody really cares about me. Like, I think about them, they don't think about me. That's the sadness that's there. That's the sadness that you're avoiding. Does that make sense? Let yourself feel that sadness. Once you feel that sadness and release it, the situation will change. People will automatically care about you. I have sometimes, like, I'll say to Mary, I need to ring such and such up today because they've got something, you know, that I've given them that I need back. I don't even call them, and they call around and drop it off. Now, that never happened to me before. I've had whole days where I've gone to Mary, you know, today I'd like to do this, that, see that person. I'll have to ring them by 10 o'clock. By 9 o'clock in the morning, they've all called me. And I've arranged the whole day. They've called me to arrange my day of all the things I wanted. But that only happens after you've dealt with things emotionally, at the soul level. So Mary, sometimes you get pretty surprised sometimes, don't you, about what happens in a day if I've dealt with something. Yeah. It's like just everything is really smooth if I've dealt with something. If I haven't dealt with something, everything's shocking. We go from one thing to another. It's just bad. But sometimes lately, events have just been amazing in terms of even when things go bad. Like, for example, our car recently broke down. We'd loaned it to the people who were doing all the documentary and who came over from England, and they're driving around a car. It's the very last day that they needed the car, and it broke down. I go there, have a look at it, and the radiator's cracked, and there's a few other problems with it. And I go, yeah, this is like a tow job, that, you know. And so I ring. I'm in the RSCQ, so I ring up the RSCQ. 5 minutes later, he's there. Wheels it on the car, takes it to the place. I go around to the place with him, and I say to him, now it's 40 k's away from my home as well, and I say to them, how long do you need a car? They said probably a week. Okay. $1,500 or $1,800 it's probably going to be in the end. And they kept it for a week. Now, the average person might have thought that was a really bad thing. But, you know, if that car had broken down in any other place other than right smack bang in the middle of the town that we go shopping in, you know, we weren't driving, it could have broken down anywhere. It would have been a huge job to get it to the place. And then if it had broken down halfway down to our trip to here, which would have been the next time we used the vehicle, we would have been stranded somewhere around Tenterfield with $2,000 worth of repairs to do, not knowing where to take it, and also taking a week. So I'm really happy it broke down when it broke down. And also I had to get home, and it was going to mean people coming and travelling to pick me up and everything. And I just go in and ask them, oh, you guys wouldn't be able to drop me out? Oh, yeah, we can drop you out. That's no worries at all. So not only do I get the car picked up within 5 minutes and everything else happened, I was home before. I expected to be home like hours later and everyone waiting for me. I was home. You know, they were still all just eating and hadn't even started doing what they were going to have to do. And so it all worked pretty smoothly. Now, years ago, what would have happened to me there? If every possible conceivable thing that could have gone wrong everything would have gone wrong. You know, I would have waited for the tow truck and it wouldn't have been one that day, you know. And I would have had to come and, put it somewhere. And there wouldn't have been just the radiator cracked, it would have been the head warped as well, because I had three aluminium heads go on different vehicles during that period of time, which meant, you know, major operation every time. That's what my life was like before I let go of certain things. Every possible bad thing that could have happened generally did. And I had your attitude to it.
Yeah, normal.
Yeah, this is normal for me. Yeah, that's the attitude I had to it. Exactly the same. I thought, yeah, this is normal for me. Someone in the universe just doesn't like me very much.
Yeah, I must have done something wrong.
Yeah, I must have done something wrong in a previous life, as the saying goes. And the irony of that. And I would often think that, you know, not that something gone wrong in previous life, but there was something wrong with me that would have caused all these things to go wrong. And, you know, sometimes I get so angry, I'd like slam the door of the car. And then not only was the engine faulty, but the window was shattered as well. Things like that, right? Used to happen. Those kind of things don't happen anymore. But I've had to deal with a lot of emotions in the process. Like in business, if something went wrong, it meant one of my partners would steal everything. Like I've had business dealings where I was in a partnership with somebody, and I came into the office that I rented with all the furniture and all the computers that I bought in the office, walked in Monday morning, and it was all gone. And you know where it was? It was four doors down from me. They'd spent the entire weekend moving all of my gear into their office, and it took 4 months of court cases to get it back. They wouldn't give it back. Eventually I got it back 4 months later. I was without all of my office for 4 months, like try and run a business without my office for 4 months because somebody had stolen my office and moved it 4 doors down. That's the kind of people I used to attract in business. And I used to go, something must happen in the you know, like. And I didn't have hardly any emotional feelings about it. The irony was then. That's how much denial I had of my emotions as well. Quite heavy. The key is to allow these things to trigger you, soften to them, let yourself go through the emotion. Once the emotion's released, then you don't have the emotion again, but also you don't attract the same events again.
You seem to blame yourself to avoid feeling the emotions, Lincoln. Seems to be like, well, you've done it like, you identified that you did it, but then you did it again a couple of times since we've just been having the back and forth. So you go, oh, and that's a good way of getting away from other pain, just blame yourself. And then have an accident and then go, well, that's my fault as well. And instead of, it's not about blaming other people, but instead of just feeling the pain that you have.
Yeah. when you blame yourself, you get to avoid the fact that other people are not loving you. And blame of yourself, usually children learn to blame themselves so that they can cope with the pain of the fact that they actually feel like their parents don't care about them. But they actually finish up feeling that they are to blame for their parents not caring about them. They feel there must be something wrong with them. And that's a way, that pain, the pain of blaming yourself, is manageable in comparison to the pain that other people don't love you or care about you. Does that make sense? And that's why we revert to self-blame, because it's a more manageable pain than the pain that other people don't care is to feel. So I've been in that place very frequently, where I blamed myself for lots and lots of things that have occurred in my life. And I had some really terrible things occur in my life as a result of blaming myself rather than feeling the pain. And once I started feeling the pain, from that point in time, things started to smoothen out in my life. So now, as I say, I can just have some feelings about what I want to do tomorrow, and it all happens without me even having to call anybody or phone anybody or organise anything. They call me. Yeah. Like sometimes now, if I'm looking for some debosure for my house or whatever, somebody calls me the next day and tells me, do you know that this guy here's got some debosure for sale? That kind of thing. It all just happens a lot more smoothly, but it never used to. It used to be a nightmare. Everything used to be a nightmare. It used to be such a nightmare for me that I used to spend days and days and days and days planning just to try and avoid things going wrong, and still they did. Yeah. So feel those feelings, my friend.
Thank you.
Usually, can I just suggest to many of you that usually the event that you're thinking about wasn't actually the cause of what finished up happening. Usually it's something smaller than the event you're thinking about that then escalated to a larger event, and eventually an event that caused the injury, in this case for you. So you climbing through the window was in the end because you didn't have the keys. It wasn't because you needed the tools. It's just the situation increases and escalates as you deny certain emotions. And so you have an accident crawling through the window because of the first issue. And the first issue is you were not considered, and you blamed yourself for it. Yeah.
So when I'm blaming myself, I generally hurt myself as a result.
Generally, yes. That's what you'll find happens. Remember I said there's only two primary reasons why we hurt ourselves. Remember the comment right at the beginning? Two primary reasons why we hurt ourselves. One is that we step away from ourselves, and in that place the spirit comes in place. And so in other words, we're out of our body while we're trying to perform a certain action. And that always occurs from avoidance of an emotion. And the second reason is because we're avoiding some emotion. We want to blame ourselves, and that helps us avoid some emotion. So we want to blame ourselves because that means that we're going to be loved, or we want to blame ourselves because that means that we're going to avoid not being loved, or whatever is the reason. But they are the two primary reasons. One is stepping away from yourself, going out of body. The other is blaming yourself for whatever reason. There might be hundreds of reasons why one person might blame themselves. Yeah. But they are the two primary causes of any accident. Yeah. How many of you ladies cut up the veggies and you find yourself little nicks here and there on your fingers all the time? Yeah? Yeah, good example. Yeah. Yeah. How many of you guys find when you're working on something, there's always one part that's missing that seems to be the key to get the whole thing finished? How many of you have found that? Gee, that's annoying, isn't it? You need to let yourself feel how annoying and frustrating that is. These are all sort of events that are law of attraction events. They're the law of attraction in perfect operation to expose a specific emotion within yourself that God's trying to help you in that moment address. It's always the case. Yeah. That's the beauty here. God's laws are just amazing. Every little event's like that. Yeah. So we have a lot less frustration, or I have a lot less frustration in my life now, I should probably say, than I used to have. Yeah. And like I said, some days and even weeks are just like everything I think of doing happens just nice and seamlessly.